that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a
Jason Gordon.
What up, buddy? How you doing?
What's up, my man? How are you?
Good. You know, it's funny. I almost did the T-shirt and hat thing, and I was like, he's gonna get all pimped out, and I'm gonna be so bummed if I don't suit up.
Dude, I have a funny story actually about this suit. I bought this back when you and I were working together, about 7 years ago, and then I put on a bunch of weight, so it hasn't fit me. So I think I've worn this thing like 2 times.
Oh, damn.
And then just finished 75 hard and lost a bunch of weight. And I'm like, I'm going to pull out a few of my old suits and just see. And it happened to fit. And so
Congratulations. That's awesome, dude.
Good for you, buddy.
What's that?
I wanted to show up looking good for you.
Hey, man, you know, I don't feel like I got cheated here. I feel like I stepped up, dude. And congrats on the weight loss. That's awesome.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. Yeah. Well, I feel like I am in the presence of a celebrity. So I'll introduce you though, for those of you that don't know Jason Gordon.
Actually, can we do a quick little, like off the record, just chat beforehand? Okay.
Sure.
So we'll pause that.
No.
Yeah, I went over your questions. I was just gonna ask if I can avoid like just I don't want to like list numbers, like, you know, incomes and that kind of stuff.
Don't worry about it, dude.
Yeah, I didn't want to be awkward when you asked me. What's that?
I'm not going to go into any of those questions other than just organically.
Okay. Yeah, I try to. I'm always pretty humble. When I'm killing it, I keep my numbers quiet. When I'm not, I keep my numbers quiet. So I just wanted to. That was the only part I looked at on your questions. But anyway, I will pretend that never happened and let you start whenever you want.
Yeah. All right. So for those of you that don't know Jason and I worked together at a previous company. I was always super impressed with your ability to get in front of a larger audience. So you're always somebody, I don't know if you knew it, but somebody that I always looked up to in the business. I always learned a lot from you. And I'm just honored that you're here today, man. So let's get into it. For those that don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody who Jason Gordon is.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for having me, Derek. I really appreciate that. Hey, folks, I'm Jason Gordon. Born and raised in SoCal. Grew up in Venice, California. You heard of Venice Beach. Moved to San Diego to go to college at San Diego State University. Go Aztecs. And like many people who come to San Diego, I never left once I graduated. It's too nice out here. So that's where I am. And got in the mortgage industry, seems like a century ago. And here I am, present day, still doing it.
How long have you been in the industry now?
Depends on when you draw the line. I got my first job in banking at Wells Fargo Bank while I was in college in 1991. Did the old jack of all trades, master of none branch banking, where you do a little bit of consumer banking, business banking, lending, savings and investments. Did that pretty much through the 90s. 1999, I think, is when I would say I really made the official jump over to mortgages.
Huh. Was it something where like coworkers were nudging you in that direction, or, you know, what was it about the mortgage business that grabbed your attention that sort of, you know, opened your eyes to this whole world?
Well, intuitively, I knew I needed to pick one and specialize if I wanted to get my, you know, advance to the next level and meet my career goals. It came down to lending or savings and investments. I was kind of, you know, switched on by both concepts. Just to be really transparent with you, when I came down to making a choice, living in California, I said, if I'm going to go savings and investments, I have to wake up early the rest of my life. I'm not doing it. I'm a night owl. I like to be social and that kind of thing. And love the idea of both. And so it wasn't a sacrifice on any level. And I love the idea of getting people into homes. And the more I explored mortgages, the more I realized it's not just getting people into homes that's how you're helping them. You're also doing a lot of other things, debt consolidation, different investment structures, those kind of things. So I still meet my investment side of things within the mortgage industry.
You know, I think I want to stay on that for a second, because I think a lot of people that get into this industry or that have a desire to get into the industry, not everybody, but oftentimes they kind of have it wrong, right? Like they think they got to be super good at math, or they've got to have a finance background. And, you know, oftentimes those individuals struggle in our business and they find out that it's really a business about people creating value, marketing, and sales. When you first got into the business, were you the person that thought it was all about the numbers, or did you know going into it that it was like you're putting on your sales hat?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because when I got in the business in again late '90s, it was nothing like what it is now. We somehow evolved into this big sales commodity based product. A lot of that's technology and going, companies going consumer direct in their marketing. But when I got in, through the banking channel, we were consultants. We would sit down and figure out what your situation was, what your goals were, how you look on paper. Do you fit inside the metaphorical box of approval in any of these loans out there? And if you do, which one has the best terms? That's how we would approach people. And then at some point, somewhere down the line, and hard to say when it really happened. I think somewhere in early mid 2000s, technology just started really transforming, and we became street vendors. Whoever has, we all sell the same product and just who had the cheapest price. And that was how consumers started seeing us. And here we are in 2024. I mean, we are commodity brokers now, which is a shame because I approached the business wanting to be a consultant.
Yeah. Same. And I think now we have the ability to position our value as being that type of individual, because there are so many other people in the space that aren't that way, and maybe they just never grew up in the business with that being familiar. But I think a lot changed when Dodd-Frank came out and changed compensation, right? Like, I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, but pay option arms and a lot of these other products, they would pay, it's like you'd make 4 to 6% on a loan. And when Dodd-Frank came out, it kind of changed a lot of that. And I
Mhm.
think maybe there's other reasons, but I think that's part of what started to shift this into a volume business. I always tell people now, like, if you really want to have a phenomenal experience and be competitive and have somebody that's cohesive with your agent and put you in a position of strength to win, there's all these ancillary components to it aside from just you doing a great job. You almost have to be working with somebody that has a team. I just think that where a lot of lenders go wrong is they never introduce the team. So the client is left feeling like they're being passed around from person to person, and they then feel like they're not having a great experience.
I totally agree. And it's a delicate balance, right? Because if you're just the sole proprietor, if you want to call that, just working and doing everything soup to nuts all by yourself with no team around you, you have no volume. And when you have a lower compensation per unit structure in the environment now, the way competition and technology and, like you said,
Mhm.
Dodd-Frank have created, volume becomes important. However, economics, the law of diminishing returns, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. If you automate everything and the consumer feels like they don't matter, that's not cool either. And it's one thing for, say, a real estate agent to say, hey, I have my team. They're going to let you into the front door to do the walkthrough. I'm not going to be there on that. Or you want to go peek at the house at night. We have a lockbox. That's kind of like a glorified Uber driver when they're just kind of giving you access to the property. But when it's your finances, your biggest debt of your life, and someone has questions about their payment, their funds to close, can they qualify? Or, but can I buy a new car? My car's about to die. Can I get a new car and drive safely and still, buy this home? They want to speak to the person that they originally engaged, not one of their administrative assistants more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. So how have you watched your business evolve over the last, you know, decade or two, where you it's like we suddenly have this need to have help, right? To hire a loan officer assistant or a loan partner to help with certain tasks throughout the process so that we can spend time where it's our highest and best use, but without making that individual feel like they're not important or like you're not involved. Um, how did you begin to shift your process where you're kind of accomplishing both. You're building the team to help support you, but also you're still involved at the point of sale and where it matters.
It's a great question. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest just game changing parts of my career was when I hired my first coordinator. And it's a leap of faith because suddenly you're creating this fixed expense. If you don't perform, not only are you not paying your own bills, but now you may have to let someone go who is relying on you to do what you hired them to do, which is to produce so they can do all the things they're hired to do. And it was a huge leap of faith. But like you said, I figured out what my highest and best use activities were and wanted to say, okay, well, look, if I look at everything I do right now, the highest and best use all the way to the lowest and worst use, and I really take all that information and I figure out, on a side note, how much do I earn? How many hours do I work? What's my quote hourly wage? And you figure out what things on that list are duties that you can have, they're below your hourly wage that you can offset to someone else, still at a very competitive wage for them. We're not, we're paying them fairly. But then if you free up all this time, what can you do with that time? And, opportunity costs, theory, if I create an extra 18 hours a week or 26 hours a week, whatever the case may be, I have a choice. I can go take that extra free time and go work on my tan at the beach. That doesn't do anything for my business. But what if I actually reinvested that saved time into more of my highest and best use activities? And then game on. And I can tell you now that as I'm talking to you now, my loan coordinator has been with me for 9 years. I always describe her as an exceptional human who just happens to be really good at mortgages. And she is everything administrative, everything tech on my team. And that's a good way from the initial conversation with the clients that they know that Laura is my partner. She's not my assistant. I don't have any ego that needs to be, kind of fed to say that I have a bunch of assistants. That's not who she is in my world. She's my teammate. And because of that, I introduce her as such. And I let the clients or whoever it is know anything administrative or tech she's going to help you with. And believe me, you're getting the best of the best in that. She's better than I am in any of those two categories. When it comes to loan structuring, different consultations, that's kind of my highest and best use. And you get me for that. And I, jokingly, I've said to some of my realtor partners, behave yourself when speaking to her. Don't make me choose between you and her because I will choose her every single time. I'll find another agent to work with, but she's my, my work wife, and, but, that level of respect I've given her since day one has led to our longevity, 9+ years in running. And she's my teammate, not my assistant.
By the way, for those of you listening that aren't in the mortgage industry or that are new to the business, I will tell you from personal experience, you're talking to a guy right now that's been in the industry for over 25 years.
Yeah, scary to say that. Yeah. I was only
but
4 years old when I started, though, of course. So
yeah, right. But to have been in the industry that long and to have a team member that's still with you 9 years later, that is remarkable. That is not an easy thing to do. And I'm guessing you have had other individuals prior to her where maybe they didn't stick with you for 9 years as you became a better leader. But what are some of the things that have if she were here right now, what are some of the things she would say you do really well that has caused her to want to stay with you for 9 years?
I think it begins with respect. The respect I show her, the respect I show my clients, all parties that we interact with. So it's not just our clients, it's what I call opposing counsel, right? The other agent. I do a lot of divorce equity buyouts. Sometimes those become a whole nother set of parties involved. And I really do what I can to kind of just sort of play nice in the sandbox with anybody who's in that sandbox with us. I don't diminish anyone's worth, and I work hard. And at this, at the same time, everything about our business plan is based on accountability. I am one of the small percentage of loan officers in the country who have a Yelp page. We all know Yelp is is uneditable. You're walking a tightrope, 50 feet up in the air with no net beneath you in the middle of a blizzard every single day. And one bad day, one bad call, one bad email could hurt you. As I'm talking to you now, if you count all the reviews that are displayed and suppressed, because they suppress half of them for whatever reason, there's well over 100 reviews, all of which are 5-star. And Laura understands that too, that anything less than a 5-star rating, we have failed. And that person who did a loan for, it's not just some client that we just made a revenue on. It's a human who's got a story behind it. They also have people in their world, friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, their own clients, that we would love to meet through them. And the best way to meet someone is through a happy handoff. And at the same time, we want that client to come back to us in the future. And we've got one shot on that audition. And so every single thing that we do has that in the background. And I think that's something that Laura and the rest of the folks that have worked with me in the past have liked, is you come to work with pride, knowing that you're not just doing a job, not just making a sale, you're helping people at a very pivotal part of their life. Think about what we do, Derek. We're helping people manage through transitions, whether it's a positive transition, like buying their first home, upgrading, downgrading, buying an investment property, or a negative transition like death, divorce, financial hardships. We're helping people out, and they all have their story. They all have their situation that, we should already want to help people out at a good level, much less helping them through that transition.
That's a great concept and idea to constantly remind yourself of. How do you remind yourself of that when you're dealing with someone that is unpleasant to deal with, or that isn't very compliant, right? Like, I'm sure you've had those clients where it's like, man, you're putting your best foot forward, you give, and not even necessarily expecting to receive, but that's just who you are. And it's just, they're nasty, or maybe their circumstances are leading them to be that way. And it's like pulling teeth to get their financials. And every time you ask them for something, they question it. How are you reminding yourself of, this is a human being with a story, when you're in the middle of that type of client and when you're really busy?
Yeah, well, a couple things. The administrative part, sort of chasing those documents down is the coordinator, Laura. However, she knows at some point to kind of bring me in if the client's not giving us what we're asking for. But really, it boils down to giving someone a why behind the ask, right? Like, for example, and this, think about how much we audit trail assets when it comes to someone buying a home. They're bringing in $100,000 to buy that home, and we're going through all their financials over the last 3 months with a fine-tooth comb, and it's very invasive. And so if it begins with us having empathy for that fellow human that is on the receiving end of this request, and I'll let them know, I realize this part, by the way, is one of the most irritating parts, and we don't take, any joy in asking you for all your bank statements. And by the way, it looks like you have money coming from 4 different accounts and you've been bouncing money back and forth the last few months. Doesn't mean you're not going to get the loan. It just means we're going to have to ask you for a little bit more. And by the way, just so you know, and I'm not trying to be silly here, a lot of this is in the government. Government oversees the banks. The banks are the ones providing the money that you're using to buy your home. And the government, sad to say, they think we're all a bunch of drug dealers, money launderers, and embezzlers until we prove that we're not. This is a requirement under the Patriot Act, or whatever the context may be.
Sure.
And they go, that makes sense, Jason. You're not just picking on me. And I do let them know too. Like, let's say, for example, these, conventional, also known as conforming loans, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. What does conforming mean? If you translate that, it means if you conform to something, you adapt to it. We lenders adapt to Fannie Freddie guidelines, not just the approval guidelines, but the documentation requirements. So in other words, no matter who begins with what checklist, we all have the same file at the end, because that file has to go through a post-closing audit. And just saying it that way lets people know, hey, if I went to my bank, they'd ask for the same documentation. If I answered that little silly 30-second commercial on the radio that I just heard on the way home, they're going to ask for the same documentation. If I want this home and I want this loan, I have to get this. And we try our best to do the heavy lifting when we can. If we can get things on their behalf, we'll do it. But in the end, it just goes back to respect. it's how you formulate the ask, and that's going to really dictate how you get your response. But to your other question, if some people are just not, pleasant people, at some point we have a tolerance where, hey, it's not a good fit. There's nobody out there, and I don't say this with any arrogance at all. It's really coming from sincerity. There's not a client, a realtor, an attorney, any person out there that's worth us compromising who we are, compromising the law, our ethics. And at some point, if it's not a good fit, just gracefully move on. It doesn't happen often, but I can tell you in 20 years plus, it's happened a couple of times. Sure.
Yeah. Something that I've always struggled with, and um, not as much now as in the past, but you spend a lot of time with someone, and then there's that like there's that sunk cost, right? But it's almost like same in a relationship. Well, God, I've been with them for 2 years. Like I can't throw in the towel now, even though there's a bunch of red flags and it's an abusive relationship, right? But same thing in this business. Like I've always struggled where even if somebody's a little nasty, I've I've tried to have the perspective of like at the end of the day, the way that I win, that my team wins is if we're able to successfully close that transaction. So oftentimes I probably put up more with more than maybe I should. But I say that's in the past because now I don't know. I just find I don't have as much tolerance for it. Like I try to be kind, but I think guys, if you didn't hear it, let me remind you what Jason said was about what was really gold, and that was your comment about explaining the why. I I share this with my team all the time. It's one thing to say you don't qualify, which we don't ever say those words on my team. Everybody is approved. It's just a matter of when. But being able to explain it to someone as though they're a first grader, and I don't say that with disrespect, but really breaking it down because sometimes we forget, like we're in this world, we've been in it for many years. So for us, it's all second nature. But for that first time home buyer or somebody that's only done it a couple times and the last time was 15 years ago, they just don't know. It's not as simple as we might think it is. So being able to explain the why behind the ask, man, dude, that's gold. It's so important. And by the way, when you do it, I mean, 9 times out of 10, the person's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Right. I think introducing the third party, hey, by the way, this isn't Derek Tolnay, this isn't my team, this isn't my company. This is an industry standard. Like if you were to hang up the phone with me and call ABC Lending down the street, they're gonna say the exact same thing because this is an industry guideline. Um, so I just
100%.
just wanted to mention that. So when you talk about um, an industry that is, in my opinion, is changing, right? I think it there's just something in the air. I can't put my finger on it, but in the last couple of years, for me, there's just been this sense of like, man, things are really different. Like they're just starting to evolve in a different way. And I think, part of that is where kind of content and media is going. But like you just had the big NAR settlement and things are getting shaken up a little bit in our industry. How have you managed to stay relevant being in the industry all these years?
It's a constant fight. I mean, let's be real. It's changed a lot, and it's on some levels a bit disheartening because you want to be this hero, this really human presence and consultant and helper to your clients, and they're their cell phone in their hands saying, I just want to use my cell phone to do all my stuff. Why do I need to talk with you? It's so much easier to just punch buttons on a phone and get my loan or whatever have you. And that's not going anywhere. And I think there's going to be a day where someone goes on Amazon and orders their shampoo and refinances their loan on the same touch of a button. And it baffles me, but technology is already there. What holds that Amazon reality back is consumer acceptance, and we're already inching towards that. Kids nowadays don't know how to hold a pen. I'm not saying that to be a grumpy old man. It's just there's a shifting in the world here, and you can't stop that. that whole internet thing's not going away. Cell phones are not going away. Now we have AI. I mean, they'll, are robots going to be the preferred loan officer? I don't know. And so, what I've done, and I've always wanted to stay relevant. I never want to be over the top in my advertising, never want to be cheesy. Always want to be of service and value. But what the consumer, what that end user wants to see and hear and be exposed to, it's a changing, evolving phenomena. And so I try to stay relevant. I mean, in the end, there is a certain segment of the market, they have an 800 credit score. They're putting 40% down. They're a W-2 job. They've been on the same job for 20 years. Maybe they're an engineer and or someone who has a job that's very sort of black and white in terms of just no variables to a lot of their interactions, very kind of routine and schedule based. They might want the robot. And, that's really a segment of the market. A lot of them qualify perfectly because they're just so responsible. Like I said, 800 credit scores don't just happen overnight. These are very viable borrowers that may just want, hey, I don't need to talk with anybody. I just want to go push some buttons and get my loan done. And Jason, hey, Derek, nothing you can say or advertise or present out there is going to be of interest to me. I have to just respect that. And, hey, we're not everyone's a good fit. I'm not making anybody wrong, but there's another segment of the market, the first-time home buyer, the person with credit challenges, the person who's trying to, buy non-contingent, and convert their departing residence to a rental property, or again, going through some of those negative transitions, death, divorce, financial hardship. They would very much prefer someone like you or I to walk them through the process. So it's just really a matter of putting it out there where, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm a subject matter expert. There's no ego, and I'm never too busy for you. Let's engage when you want to engage. And in the meantime, just know I'm here. And hopefully after you've engaged, you're a happy person who wants to share my name and become an advocate in my absence.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, in my opinion, long before the industry ever goes in a direction where it's 100% robotic and just, truly pushing a button, getting a mortgage, I think there will be a world that we live in where it's sort of, what is your cup of tea? Like you kind of just described. It's like, I think of like a Neiman Marcus and a Sephora, right? Like Sephora has a business model where you walk in, you just pick it out on the shelf and you pay for it and you leave. There's a business, a big business with that. But there's also the type of person that appreciates kind of being pampered. They want to sit down, have somebody bring them their scotch or a latte, and have somebody really bring clothes out and have that experience. And I think oftentimes people think what they want is just the quick, simple, let me push the button, until they've experienced what it's like to have somebody really cater to you at a high level. And I know that's the way you run your business. It's also the way I run mine. But I want to shift gears a little bit into sort of because you've built a super successful business. We were just talking a couple weeks ago about how you're really doing a lot of work now with divorce attorneys and people that are experiencing that unfortunate or fortunate part of their lives, and you're there to help them through it with the financing. Talk a little bit about how you ended up being such a big spokesperson for that industry down in San Diego. And if there's some new loan officers listening to this where they're like, man, I'm kind of burnt out on just going after agents, or hey, I like going after agents, but I want to introduce a new vertical. How did that come about for you?
Yeah, I didn't just wake up one day saying, "Hey, I'm going to go after divorcing folks," and I'm happy to elaborate on that, and I will. I want to just preface it by saying that everything I do, it's all about respect to the sanctity of marriage. I'm not celebrating divorce, and I'm not breaking up marriages to get a commission, right? I'm not calling on divorce filings and saying, "Hey, I heard you're getting divorced. You want a loan?" Nothing like that at all. And I say that because I see a lot of things online on social media where this is what people think divorce is in some circles. And I'm thinking that's exactly why you don't do this. But I have an example, which, I sometimes just offer in situations like this. I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to round up numbers, but this is not too far off from what actually went down. This is over 20 years ago. I remember this. I was in my office, not too far from here, in a place called Mission Valley, San Diego.
Okay.
Someone I knew referred a woman to me. I'll leave names out, of course. She said, I need to come in and talk with you. It's time sensitive. Can we meet today? I said, absolutely. She came in my office, sat down in my conference room. She was holding a court order. She had just completed her divorce 2 days ago. The ink was dry and she had her court judgment in her hand. And she said, I'm looking to buy out my ex-husband. This is on my court documents. My attorney said, to bring this in and get this loan done for you. And just to kind of paraphrase and round off numbers here, the property value was $500,000. It was in both of their names. The payoff of the existing loan was for $400,000, again in both of their names. She was what we call the in-spouse. She's going to stay in the home. He was the outspouse. He's moving out of the home. Nice gender neutral terms here.
Yeah.
And as the in-spouse, she was here to get an equity buyout loan. Well, what's an equity buyout loan? Well, to understand that, you have to understand what the outspouse, him, wanted. He had two conditions, which are very common conditions, that the outspouse says, you want to keep the marital home, meet these two conditions and you can have it. So condition number one is remove me from the debt obligation of that $400,000. And number two is I want my divvy. There's $100,000 of equity. I want $50,000. So she was looking to get a new loan for $450,000. I'm leaving out closing costs just for rounding off numbers, but within moments of, talking with her, pulling her credit, within less than 5 minutes, I knew definitively she did not qualify for this loan. And what was once a very happy conversation turned very emotional very quickly. It was very brief. And I was trying to really explain to her, just the process. And she said to me, and she grabbed her court order and she waved it kind of, across the table towards me. She said, my attorney told me all I have to do is show you this court order and you have to lend this money to me. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, first of all, who's your attorney? It's horrible advice. The courts can't force somebody to get a loan, can't force a bank to lend to somebody. And so, long story less long, she walked out very emotional, grabbed her court order. I never spoke with her again. But the person who referred her to me is someone I'm still in touch with to this day. And this person wanted to offer up some clarity as to what happened after that woman left my conference room. Apparently, she went to her bank. Because, after all, she has a checking account with $5,000 in it. Then, of course, they're going to lend to her because they're her bank for the last 10 years. And they said, no, told her the same things I told her. Apparently, she then called her attorney and it was a very emotional conversation. Suffice to say, she burned every bit of that bridge in that conversation. He was fired. They were no longer working together. And then she decided to call her ex-husband and say, hey, we need to redo this thing. I can't get the loan. And apparently he gaslighted her. It was a very contentious divorce. He said, more or less, this is just like you not to do your homework and expect everyone else to clean up your mess. I'm not going to do it. You have now, 58 days left between the 60 days to perform. And the fact that this document's 2 days old, you have 58 days left to give me my $50,000 and remove me from the loan. Otherwise, we're going back to court and I'm going to get full custody of our daughter. Brutal, right? So as it turned out, apparently she panic sold, paid all the costs for the real estate agents and the cost to sell, title and escrow, a couple of small repairs. She walked, oh, by the way, she walked with less than $10,000. He got his 50. She had to tell her teenage daughter that they had to move. She was in high school, and apparently that was not a very good message. And so long story, kind of bring it full circle, I was kind of traumatized. Not about me, but I went to my boss and I said, why didn't the attorney call me first? Why didn't this woman call me first? And I realized there's a real problem because everyone just kind of accepted this as this is how things are done. Nobody was advocating for anybody. And this divorcing homeowner who was not an expert on family law, on taxation, on real estate, on lending, who's going through an emotional process had to be the expert on all that in that moment. It wasn't fair. And so um, I can go on, but I feel like I'm rambling a bit. But that really made me want to help people. It wasn't for another decade plus where we started having actual divorce related curriculums and credentials brought out and available for mortgage and real estate professionals. There's actually 4 that are recognized right now. I did a full deep dive. I got all 4 of them, and nobody else in the country has all 4 of them. And it's not to say, look at all this alphabet soup after my name. It's because I really wanted to help people out on that level.
Hmm. So, before we go any further, if somebody is in the Southern California area, are there events you do from time to time? And is there a particular organization you're involved with? Like, how can people learn a little bit more if they're listening, going, man, I own property, I'm going through a divorce, or that might be what happens. How can they find you?
It's a great question. So no matter who they are, I have an e-card, which is the new technology nowadays. Go to divorceloanpro.com, divorceloanpro.com. That's a landing page that will give you hyperlinks to my website, to my online reviews. I have a YouTube where I'm constantly providing content that helps divorcing homeowners as well as attorneys. As far as the other part of your question, events, I am a member or an affiliate member of the San Diego Family Law Bar Association. I've done presentations to them. In fact, just recently, I had about 200 attorneys in a room. I had a half hour with all of them, and that's always a fun room to walk in front of, right? The only lender in a room full of 200 family law attorneys and judges. That was, but I love it. And so one of those 4 credentials, by the way, and of the 4, there's 2 that I always want to highlight. The CDLP, the Certified Divorce Lending Professional, is, in my opinion, the best of the best for mortgage professionals. And then the CDRE, the Certified Divorce Real Estate Expert, is, in my opinion, the best of the best for real estate agents. And I'm the only non-real estate agent to have the CDRE. I actually just was able to meet with the head honcho. Her name is Laurel Starks. She's written a book on the topic, and she was just very impressed with the sincerity in which I was approaching this, and she allowed me to be the only mortgage lender to ever go through the curriculum. And a couple years after I went through the curriculum, at the time, by the way, the faculty of this organization is called the Alumni Institute. The faculty at the time was Laurel, who I would say is the the commander in chief. She's the real estate agent who literally wrote the book on divorce real estate. She had a mortgage underwriter. She had 3 family law attorneys and a superior court judge on her faculty. And about 2 years after I earned the CDRE, the mortgage underwriter actually moved and was no longer going to be part of Alumni. And I was given the opportunity to be part of the faculty. So that was a huge honor. And so to this day, I educate CDREs throughout the country, whether that be on, Zoom, because they're all over the country, or whether they come out to a, an in-person seminar. But these are the best of the best. And to be able to have a influence, at least on the mortgage side, of what they're learning, because I know what is fluff and I know what is content, and I'm giving them straight content. In fact, that's my running joke, is another fluff-free, content-rich presentation by Jason, right? That's how I want to be known. And if it goes too fast and you're left wanting more, or wanting to watch the replay of the recording, then I did a good job, right? If I'm giving you a bunch of fluff and, oh yeah, divorce isn't so pleasant, we already know that. Let's get to content where you can learn and be better at your job. And that's been a huge part of that. That's actually become almost about half of my business right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we, start getting closer to 2/3 of my business. I really feel like I'm helping people out on a high level, whether it's the consumer needing the financing, or whether it's the conduit with that CDRE or that divorce attorney that says, hey, I need someone like you on my divorce team. Same way a divorce attorney would, pull in a CPA if there's a tax question about selling a rental property or whatever have you. I want them to pull me in on anything mortgage, so that we can help people make decisions properly before that ink dries.
Dude, that's fantastic. Congratulations as well. And I think that
Thank you.
even though it took some time to get to a point where you develop the relationship and now you're speaking for this organization, the reality is you were playing the game, right? Like you put yourself in a position to win, and so often I think people and really any entrepreneurial endeavor, they never actually put themselves in the position to win. They think to contemplate, to evaluate, to reconsider, and don't ever do the thing that's going to eventually lead to the result. I've got this now. I look back, I go, wow, what a crazy story. We just, in fact, right before this call, I walked out of a presentation with a builder that we just brought on as an account of ours. And it's a big honor because this is a very, very reputable builder in the Denver area. The properties they're building, which for Denver is a higher price point, it's like luxury mountain modern. They're between 2 and 3.5 million, right? So they're semi-customs. Every agent's falling all over themselves to try to get in with this builder as well. And I am the sole preferred lender for the builder. The name of the company is Workshop. Well, the way that this relationship came about was about 3.5 years ago. My wife was pregnant. The house we were living in was just too small. I had bought it 5 years prior to that point where she's pregnant. So we're like, okay, we know we're going to have to move and get something a little bigger. Just so happened it was right when like rates got really freaking good. So we ended up moving, about 2 miles west of where we previously lived, same general neighborhood. But the seller of that property was selling their house and it was on a cul-de-sac and also owned an adjacent property, but that adjacent property was just raw land. Okay, so it was two separate parcels. I found myself negotiating to purchase that property, multiple offers at the time. The asking price at the time was 1.9, and I found myself negotiating to get our offer accepted out of these other offers. I said, what's important to your seller? The agent said, well, he built this house himself. He also has owned this adjacent piece of land that he's really enjoyed because it's provided some privacy. And he wants the new buyer to have the ability to have that same privacy and, experience as he did with the extra land. So for the seller, he wants to be able to sell both. Now, I knew being in the business that it's not always super easy to be able to do one loan on two parcels, right?
Mhm.
Now, they were subdivided two parcels, but I ended up knowing a way to get it done. So I negotiated the deal. We got under contract. Ultimately, I ended up closing on that house for 1.7 by the time I was done through appraisal and inspection. And that she was including the land as a part of that cost. We got an appraisal on the land. So anyway, we ended up buying it for a lot less than what they wanted initially. But I knew that I didn't care about the land. It wasn't like it really wasn't like the backyard was providing the privacy. So when I went under contract, I said, look, I don't care if somebody builds a house right there. It's going to have zero impact on my view or my sense of privacy on this cul-de-sac, right? So
Mhm.
I called a few builders in town. One in particular that said, I'll buy it and I'll write you a check. But it was important to me that it wasn't just any builder, right? It was important to me that it wasn't somebody that was just going to pitch a tent for 10 years and eventually build on it. I wanted it to really add to the value of the neighborhood and community. And that builder was Workshop. So I sold them this piece of land. I had it structured to where when I sold it, I didn't have to pay a penny in tax and I didn't have to give any money back to the bank.
Awesome.
So it was like this amazing situation, but it was that seed that I planted that eventually led itself to the relationship that I now have with Workshop. And I share that story because that was several years, much like your endeavor into the divorce lending side of things. And I think people got to be in the game to win and not be distracted. They got to be looking for opportunity.
Well, yeah, and what you just got done describing, my takeaway of that is a couple things led to that. Number one, your professional acumen to understand the logistics behind financing of that kind of property. Um, you manage from abundance, not from scarcity. You didn't want to pay for what you didn't need. And you had the forethought to look at the community side of things and bring in a builder partner that could maybe be something that, an alliance that you can partner with. So the fact that all that worked out, you have a place to live that I'm presuming that you like, and a partnership now, which I'm sure is the envy of many lenders where you're at, that doesn't just happen by accident. So kudos to you. That's the sum total of a lot of individual efforts and insights that put that together for you. So nice job, dude.
Yeah, thank you. And oftentimes I get asked, like, how did you do that? Or how did you grow your business? And I go, no, it's who. They go, what do you mean? I go, it's who I have had to become. And I don't know if you would agree, but I think that just human nature is like, we want to know the steps, right? That's why, like, every YouTube video you see, it's like the 5 steps to becoming successful or whatever, right? But really, it's who we become as individuals. And I think, at least in this industry, I can speak to, as can you, but would you agree that in order to grow your business within this industry, you have to become better?
That should be the primary, or like top 3 of these, not who's the best salesperson, but who's the most competent at their job. If I can just real quickly go back into the divorce side of things, just because it ties right into what you just got done saying, is, of those 4 divorce related credentials, the first one I got, which was not one of the 2 I recommended, and I'll leave out the name, I don't want to offend anybody, but I was told when I got that, hey, go tell all these attorneys that I educated you. Tell them where I went to law school. Tell them this, tell them that. And the seas will open. I mean, this big pile of money will just appear because you tell them all this stuff. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't really think that's enough, but I like the education. I'm not sure that just dropping a name is going to be enough. And there's a great expression by Warren Buffett. It says, when the tides recede, we'll all know who's been swimming naked. Okay, so if you're trying to fake it till you make it with attorneys in their office on their home turf about their home concept, which is divorce, they could ask a couple of very well positioned questions and expose you for not having a bathing suit on underneath that ocean, if you know what I mean.
For sure.
And attorneys dissect testimony for a living. Your sales pitch is your testimony. If you don't know what you're talking about, then don't try to fake it till you make it. And that's a big problem with folks like you and I in our industry, as well as real estate. A lot of these mortgage and real estate professionals are in that B2C conversation, right? Business to consumer. And they're convincing someone respectfully, without the sophistication of our industry, that they're an expert. I just got my real estate license, and I know everything I need to know about real estate. Do you? Well, I was able to convince this person who's not as versed that I am an expert, and I can make this sale. And you have kind of blind leading the blind. You bring that over to B2B, and especially if that person you're addressing is an attorney, especially a family law attorney. Those are some of the toughest, grittiest people on the planet. You better have your act together. And so that's where I just wanted to get more and more information. An old boss of mine always said, Jason, the problem with you is you're always getting ready to get ready. Just get out there and do it. I'm like, okay, I hate that you said that, because you're probably right. I'm a perfectionist. But in this particular avenue, you cannot have too much education. And it's given me the confidence to approach these divorce attorneys and again, realize it's not a fit for everybody. I mean, I jive better with mediation and collaboration than I do litigation, right? Just, in terms of mediation, collaboration, the parties are kind of more often than not working together to resolve the divorce process, where litigation sometimes could be, a bit more contentious and people don't really want to work together. Attorneys leading the charge on those, sometimes those attorneys just say, hey, look, Jason, we're not going to need you. We're just going to sell the property when the time comes. And it's going to be a drop down, drag out fight throughout the process. We don't need you to come in and play, the cooperative professional here on the mortgage side. Or the mediator might say, Jason, we have these 2 parties getting divorced. They do want to keep their son or daughter in the marital homes, at least until they graduate high school. We're willing to make things work. If you can give us guidance on the guidelines, let us know how we can make this all work where everyone achieves their goals. Huge difference, right? And just that whole approach. But you don't get that ability to have that kind of perception to others with that fake it till you make it attitude. So, get out there and do the work. And then ideally people are going to respond to you for doing the work.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about doing the work since you brought it up. I think that as I've spent time in the industry, one thing I've noticed about people at a high level on the mortgage side or the real estate side, not all of them, but oftentimes at a high level, they've developed some kind of system, structure, process. Whereas, like, if I look back to when I first got into the business, it was just, hey, I didn't know much, right? I knew I could talk to people, but that was about it. I had a desire to do something better with my life. And so that's what really drove me. But then fast forward, and now my whole business is super like system, structure, process. I help agents develop that for themselves. And I think it never can be too soon, right? Like the person that says, well, when I'm closing 25 transactions a month, then I'll do it. It's like, no, then it's more difficult to do because you got to go back and put all the pieces together. Walk us through, like, for somebody that's listening that either is thinking about getting into the mortgage business or they're in the business, they've seen a little bit of success. Walk us through sort of morning routine or any sort of daily habits that you've incorporated that have become consistent for you. And then with prospecting in particular. Now, with half your business being you working with attorneys, walk us through what your prospecting looks like and how often.
Okay. So I think it boils down to being coachable and being adaptable and not getting sort of set in your ways. And this is coming from someone with 20 plus years experience. Don't get set in your ways. The industry is going to evolve with or without you. So you might as well evolve with it. And, I remember years and years ago, I was doing presentations of this real estate seminar. I'd have 200-300 agents at a time. And about 12 years ago, I had given a presentation. Actually, I think it was 13 years ago, with one of our former coworkers. Actually, it was all about social media, and it was to agents being able to advertise their listings on a customized property website, which now is like everyone does that now. But back then, people are like,
Right.
I use a one-page MLS printout with a little photocopied photo of a thumbnail of the front of the house, which because it was photocopied, you can't even see what the house looks like. And that was how they would sell houses. And I'm thinking, well, we have virtual tours, we have Google Map integration, we have all these different thumbnails you can go through. Somebody can really pretend on living in this house as a result of looking at this website. Oh, we don't need that. And I remember going, okay, well, and just out of curiosity, how many have been in the business 10 years plus? And all these hands go up. Those zeros are in. How many of you have at least one person who's brand new, who's outperforming you right now? And the hands kind of start going up. I said, well, why? Because they're evolving and you're not. And so to bring that back to your original question, stay coachable. I'll give an example here. CRMs, right? I always see all these debates on social media. Which is the best CRM to market to your clients or your database management? The answer is the CRM that you use, right? So pick one, stop chasing the shiny object and use it. It comes to training. If you don't have a desire to constantly get better, and that kind of ties into what I said before, I won't repeat all that, but take the efforts to get better. And nowadays, I mean, you have YouTube videos, you have podcasts like yours, and there's so much information out there. Plug into it. And, I really believe in, exercise and staying in shape. It keeps you mentally a lot more aware. You're on that treadmill, you're on that Stairmaster or whatever it may be, or, the elliptical, put in your earbuds, listen to education while you're doing that. And it's amazing how between that or just being in the car and just commuting and getting some kind of education, I feel like we're constantly keeping ourselves, more and more aware. We're constantly sharpening our saw, so to speak. and it just really helps out. Now, as far as any regimented business development, admittedly, that's not my strong suit. I know when I've had coaches, Jason, do this and do that, and you'll make more money. I get it. Doing the best I can. I could be doing better. I tend to do what a lot of people do, which is I play to my strengths. I don't like making outbound calls because I don't like the sensation of receiving a call that I wasn't looking for. Um, those of you who want to telemarket me, please don't, because I don't respond to it very well. So unfortunately, with that same mentality, I don't make a lot of outbound calls, and that's where I have to get over myself. To be quite honest, I'm not saying that anyone listening to this should use that as advice. And hell, Jason doesn't make calls. I'm not going to make the calls. That's something I know will improve a lot more as I start doing that more. And I do have a mortgage performance coach, and that's one thing we're working on right now. And I'm picking up that phone a bit more now than I was. But in the end, I think it really comes down to reputation based, or being reputation based, and having, an image where someone says, Jason, I've seen you around. I got my lender right now. This is my number one, but I wouldn't mind having you in a backup quarterback position because I like what I see and hear about you. I like the way you present yourself, and I could see you and I aligning. I could see our clients responding to your service. First, when that quarterback goes down, you're getting the call, get on the field and you get ready to play, and that kind of thing. So I'm really trying to be that way with folks. But any kind of hardcore sales regime, I feel that's one of my deficiencies, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just more relationship driven and impactful, where you might develop a relationship with one divorce attorney who then introduces you to others, or one agent who then introduces you to others. And yeah, it's attraction rather than promotion, right? Now, a couple things that in fact, I was just talking about this with a guest on another show, but one of my very closest friends today, we're actually now business partners in another venture. Uh, I met him through a cold call when I
Wow.
first came to Denver, Colorado. Now, a bit of it was luck, I admit. What wasn't luck is me making the call, but who was going to pick up on the other end, and then the chemistry we had when we met, and we've maintained and grown a friendship over the last decade, and now we're business partners in something else. But I think a lot of it is like the story we tell ourselves, right? And how do we treat it like a game, but in a way that adds value? So the reality is some people do buy from cold calls. Now, admittedly, I'm not like, I don't do, I mean, I don't really do any cold calls. I develop relationships, but I do have a little bit more of a regimented X amount of calls per day. I have a themed day where it's just agents, a themed day where it's just, VIPs, which would be your divorce attorneys. So I have sort of this framework with it, but 9 out of 10 people that I call are agents that I know through another agent. It might be a listing agent on a transaction where I'm building the relationship with them. But treating it as though, hey, I'm valuable and I know that I have something I can offer this agent, even if I'm not their primary lender, I can still be their backup, right? But I know I'm bringing enough value to where I'm willing to make the phone call. And yeah, like some people are going to be upset and hang up and not be responsive. And then you never know, you might end up meeting a new best friend and developing a super close relationship with somebody. But the other tactic that, and this is a constant for me, but I think a lot of times there's call reluctance from any sales professional, right? The reality is nobody likes rejection, and nobody wants to spend time on something that doesn't produce a result. And I think that it's easy to get into that state of mind where it's like, man, I could make 100 calls to agents or divorce attorneys that I don't know. And what's the likelihood of anybody being responsive and wanting to meet with me? And so we kind of talk ourselves into that state of mind. And then law of attraction says, your wish is my command, right? So, hey,
Right.
like I'm not gonna have results. And you're right, you're not gonna have results. Or, hey, what is it that I'm going to communicate on every one of those phone calls. So what we've started to do, every Sunday, our director of operations sends out he calls it his Sunday's best. I mean, it's literally everything from like a food recipe to a new guideline change, a new product announcement, something, right? And there's always like 2 or 3 things that I can use as an effective, we call it a go-to conversation. So my processor like dismantles this, 7-page email Sunday's best. She highlights 3 of those things in our Monday team call, and then the team votes on the one thing I'm going to talk about that week. So now every phone call I make, it's not off the cuff. I'm not trying to think in the moment and go, gosh, what am I going to talk about? It's very clear, which allows me to be intentional, impactful. And if it is a cold call or a listing agent that I don't really know or somebody I'm not familiar with, hey, I know you're busy. I'll be brief. I just wanted to let you know I'm holding an event on May 16th about how to get your buyer's offer accepted in a competitive market. I'll shoot you an email with some more details. Also, I don't know if your go-to lender has shared this with you yet, but there's a new guideline change and here's what it is. But having that in the back of my head with every call, man, it's so much easier. And then if there are callbacks or more calls happen throughout the whole week, I never have to remember because that's the theme that entire week.
I like that. And you're giving them value. If they're giving you 30 seconds before they have to end that call, you're giving them something to take away, as opposed to, hey, I'm a nice guy and I'm looking for referrals.
Totally. But there is a valid point to like, man, I don't want to be spinning my wheels with a bunch of, I'll just use agents that don't have the ability to refer. I mean, let's be honest with the way the industry has evolved over the last couple of years. There are a lot of agents that were doing business that now aren't. And not that they don't want to introduce you to a client, but they may not have that client. So I fully understand, like, be smart about it. Don't just make phone calls for the sake of making phone calls. But if you identify agents that are maybe connected to somebody else, or they're a big whale top producer that you want to go after, those phone calls are worth making because you just never know the timing of it, even if they're a huge agent.
100%. And obviously you're proof of that. I mean, you've got proof of concept.
Well, dude, great seeing you, man. As always, ironically, I think my family and I are going to be coming out to San Diego sometime in maybe August, September. So I'll have to ask you off the call here. If you have any suggestions in terms, like if we rented a house somewhere, if there's a good location, if we want to, take the kids to like SeaWorld or Legoland or something, but I think we're coming out there in August. So if we do, and we're out there for a week, it'd be great to see you.
100%. And I'll be happy to answer those questions offline because there's plenty. San Diego's got so many great things. So yeah, there's plenty to talk about on that end. So yeah, let me know. Happy to chat.
Hey, one last time again, where can people find you?
So I have an electronic business card, divorceloanpro.com. It's real simple, divorceloanpro.com. And if you don't like the word divorce, same, you can go to vipborrower.com and reach the same destination. Sometimes the divorce word triggers people. So vipborrower.com or divorceloanpro.com, same end result. You'll get my e-card, all the information, and then some you can ever imagine is all there. And I'm happy to chat with you.
Cool. Awesome, buddy. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks, Derek.
Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah, I had to plan it. The way I work is out of this earth. I can feel the momentum. Need it all, no fractions. Dream it, then I gotta have